Having settled the elderly woman's grocery bill, she leaned in close and murmured, "When your husband goes out, don't touch the snow in the yard." I chuckled at the odd warning, but chose to heed it and left the driveway unshoveled. The next morning, stepping onto the porch, I was taken aback by what greeted me. Inside the local grocery store, I was queued up at the checkout, clutching my faded tote bag tightly. Through the windows, a fierce blizzard raged, sweeping relentlessly across the streets. This December had proven especially harsh with snow. At 58, I no longer raced from store to store hunting bargains, but instead frequented the familiar neighborhood shop, where clerks greeted me by name. Just ahead at the register, a stooped old woman in a worn shawl was fumbling with her coins. From a ragged wallet, she spilled loose change onto the counter, counting them with trembling hands. On the conveyor belt lay humble items: a loaf of bread, a carton of milk, 3 potatoes, and a small onion. "Ma'am, you're short, Candace," the cashier, a young woman with weary eyes, said softly. "About $1. How can that be, dear?" the old woman murmured, confused, rifling through her coins again. "I counted them all at home." Behind me, impatient sighs and shifting feet showed the line lengthening with people eager to escape the storm. I looked at the small, cold figure, her hands red from the chill, her meager groceries, and something stirred inside me. How often had I passed by others, suffering, pretending not to see? How often had I turned away from another's need? Yet today, something compelled me forward. "Candace, ring it up with mine," I said, slipping a $20 bill over the old woman's shoulder. "I'll cover it." Flustered, she turned toward me. "Oh, honey, you don't have to. I'll just put something back." "Don't worry, ma'am," I smiled warmly. "It's nothing, really." Her gaze lifted to mine, and I shuddered involuntarily at the piercing intensity in her eyes. They were not aged at all, but clear and deep, seeming to look straight through me, to my very soul. Though small and fragile, her face deeply lined, those eyes radiated some strange strength and ancient wisdom. "Thank you, daughter," she said, gathering her items into a faded plaid bag, her voice thick with gratitude. "Your kindness won't be forgotten. It will come back to you." I shrugged and moved to pay for my own groceries: chicken for stew, vegetables, bread, a couple of canned goods. Vernon was leaving that evening for another long haul, gone for a week or maybe 10 days. I had to prepare food for his trip and stock up on necessities while he was away. 32 years married, and through it all, I'd seen him off on countless journeys, waited for his return, cooked, cleaned, kept the household running. Life moved in a familiar, monotonous rhythm. Just as I gathered my bags to leave, a firm grip caught the sleeve of my old coat. The old woman stood beside me, clutching the fabric tightly with wiry fingers so that I couldn't pull away right away. "Listen carefully, daughter," she whispered, leaning close so I could feel her breath. She smelled of mothballs, dried herbs, and something else elusive and ancient. "When your husband leaves tonight, don't touch the snow in the yard. Do you hear me? No matter what he says, don't shovel till morning. Leave the white untouched." "What?" I blinked, confused by the strange warning. "What snow? Don't touch the snow until morning," she repeated slowly and clearly, as if engraving the words into my mind. Her grip on my sleeve tightened painfully. "Promise me. This is very important. Your life depends on it. Trust the old woman." "Yes, okay," I said automatically, freeing my arm and stepping back. My heart raced with unease. That intense, almost hypnotic stare unsettled me. "I won't shovel, I promise." Finally releasing me, she nodded slowly, apparently satisfied, then surprisingly sprite. She hurried out, disappearing into the snowy world beyond the glass doors. I watched her leave, then shook my head, brushing off the strange feeling. The poor woman must be a bit unwell. I felt sorry for lonely, impoverished elders lost in their fantasies and superstitions. Perhaps loneliness and hardship muddle the mind. That's why she babbled nonsense about snow and husbands. Outside, biting wind and snowflakes hit my face. I shivered, pulling my old scarf tighter and hurried toward the bus stop, where a small group of chilled people waited. Vernon and I lived on the city's edge, in a quiet suburb with spacious lots. The house had belonged to my parents, a solid old structure with thick walls built in the 70s. I'd been its mistress for years. I revived the neglected garden, planted apple trees that bore fruit every summer, and nurtured flower beds roses by the porch, peonies lining the walkway. 32 years married, and nearly 30 of those spent in this home that was mine. The bus was cramped, stuffy, and smelled of damp wool. I squeezed to a window, rested my forehead against cold glass, and thought again of the strange woman's words. Don't touch the snow. What sort of nonsense was that, honestly? Just this morning, while hastily eating breakfast before leaving, Vernon had grumbled that the driveway needed clearing urgently. The snowdrifts were piling high, walkways buried. He told me to have it done by evening, so the car could turn around. And here, some odd old lady whispered strange warnings about the snow. Mere coincidence. Nothing more. The house greeted me with dark, empty windows and chill. Vernon had left early for the depot to prep his truck and hadn't turned on the heat. Inside, I shook snow from my boots on the mat, slipped off my wet coat, and crossed the cold floor to the kitchen. I cranked up the thermostat, set the kettle on the stove, unpacked the groceries, and carefully put everything away, the vegetables in the pantry, chicken in the fridge, bread in the box. Every action was familiar, practiced over years. Slowly the house warmed. The creak of the baseboards felt cozy as heat spread. The kettle began to whistle. Vernon was due back around 6 to gather his things and food for the road. I began cooking methodically as always, cleaning and cutting the chicken to make a rich broth, chopping vegetables for the salad Vernon liked to take, taking the meatloaf from the freezer I'd prepared a week earlier just for this trip. He preferred homemade meals over roadside diners, claiming those places served nothing but chemicals and filth. Exactly at 6, the front door slammed open, cold air rushing in as Vernon entered. He stomped heavily, shaking snow from his jacket onto the floor without a glance at the puddles forming. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered, hard face and gray eyes cold as steel. Though 59, he looked solid and strong despite 25 years behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. "Is everything ready?" he asked without greeting, not meeting my eyes, heading straight to the kitchen. "Yes, Vern, I'm packing it now." I'd laid out prepared containers and was carefully arranging cooled soup, meatloaf, salad, and cornbread. He sat at the table, poured himself tea from the old ceramic pot, stirred in 3 spoons of sugar, and stayed silent, eyes glued to his phone screen as he typed rapidly without looking up. I stole a glance at him, the familiar profile down to every detail. When had this distance begun? The cold barrier between us, the alienation. A year ago, 2, 5 or 10. In earlier years, he'd come back from trips tired but happy, hugging me at the door, sharing stories of the road, the people he met, laughing and joking. Now there was only silence irritation in every move, every glance like I was a burdensome servant, not a wife. "Clear the snow tonight once it's dark," Vernon said without lifting his eyes from the phone. "The driveway's completely buried. It might drift even more tomorrow. Vernon, it's almost dark already." "The storm is bad," I began, but stopped as I caught his cold look. "I said this evening," he cut me off sharply. "You're not a child. It'll take you half an hour. I don't have time. The haul starts early tomorrow. The cargo is important." I pressed my lips together, continuing silently to pack the food into the large travel bag. The old woman's warning echoed suddenly in my thoughts. Don't touch the snow after he leaves tonight. Such a bizarre coincidence, almost unbelievable. But then again, what kind of coincidence was it really? It was winter, after all, And in weather like this, shoveling snow was an unavoidable chore, sometimes weekly, sometimes more frequently. I asked in a soft voice, "When are you heading out?" "In about an hour," he replied. The shipment was packed tight and sealed, the paperwork signed and ready. Vernon drained the last of his cold tea in one gulp and rose with a heavy sigh. "I'm going to shower, gather my things, and leave," he said, heading upstairs to the bedroom. Left alone in the kitchen, I ate slowly from the cooled soup I'd prepared earlier that morning. Outside the window, a fierce wind roared and big snowflakes fell relentlessly. I moved to the window, pulled back the curtain, and gazed outside. The lone street lamp near the gate struggled to pierce the dense curtain of swirling snowflakes. The path leading to the gate was nearly covered entirely. The snowdrift reached up to my knees. About 40 minutes later, Vernon descended the stairs, already dressed in his travel clothes, a heavy duffel slung over one shoulder. I handed him the food bundle, wrapped in multiple layers. "Will you call when you arrive?" I asked, though I knew he usually didn't, but old habits died hard. "Yeah," he replied curtly, snatching the bag without meeting my eyes. There was no goodbye kiss this time, no usual farewell, just a brief nod. "Make sure you shovel the snow, all right? Or it'll drift again overnight and you won't get out in the morning." With that, the door slammed shut with a dull thud. Outside, I heard the rumble of his old pickup starting, then rolling away down the snowy street. The engine's sound slowly faded into the distance. I sat down at the kitchen table, wrapping my hands around a cold cup of tea. Silence settled heavily, leaving a hollow, uneasy feeling inside me, though I didn't understand why. The old woman's words returned to me, clear and insistent. "Don't touch the snow." I shook my head, trying to dismiss such thoughts as superstition, pure folly. Yet something stopped me from bundling up and going outside to clear the yard, as Vernon had instructed. Fatigue crashed over me suddenly, like a weighty sack dumped on my shoulders. The day had been long and draining. My legs tingled with exhaustion, and my back ached from housework. The blizzard was raging so fiercely that any effort now would be futile. The snow would simply pile up again by morning. What was the use of suffering through it now? I decided I wouldn't brave the bitter cold and drag a shovel around the yard. I'd handle it in the morning if it truly became necessary. Vernon was already gone, far away. He wouldn't see, wouldn't know. And if asked, I could always blame the blizzard, say it was pointless to clean in weather like this. Upstairs, I changed into an old, warm nightgown and a soft robe, then lay down on the bed with a worn book I had started a week ago, but never managed to read. The letters swam before my tired eyes, and my thoughts tangled, returning again and again to that strange encounter at the store. Who was that mysterious old woman? Why did she say that exact phrase about the snow and the yard? Why had she stared so intently, so seriously, so piercingly into my eyes, as if warning me about something terrifying and unavoidable? Outside the window, the wind howled relentlessly, and the house groaned under the force of the gusts. I stood up, walked to the bedroom window, and looked out. The yard was shrouded in darkness. Only the faint, yellowish glow from the single lamp by the gate faintly lit the thick, swirling snow. The pathway had vanished beneath a thick, white blanket. The gate, porch, rose bushes, all were buried beyond recognition. An unfamiliar, anxious sensation gripped my chest, tightening like a vice, as if something crucial was about to occur that night. Something fateful, impossible to ignore or delay. I returned to bed and pulled the warm covers up to my chin. Despite my weariness, sleep eluded me. I lay there, listening to the winter wind's mournful howl outside the window, unable to shake the growing unease squeezing my heart. The old clock on the nightstand ticked steadily, marking 11 o'clock. Vernon was likely far away now, speeding down the snowy highway, perhaps listening to the radio, sipping strong coffee from his thermos, lost in his own thoughts. What had he been thinking lately? I wondered. We had barely exchanged words in recent months, even years. He came home, silently slept off the road, ate without looking at me, packed up again, and left. We lived as strangers beneath the same roof, bound only by a marriage certificate. When had it come to this? I sifted through memories of our recent years together. Perhaps it all began after we learned we couldn't have children. But that had been so long ago, over 3 decades back, at the start of our marriage. Back then, Vernon offered comfort, spoke the right words, assuring me we'd live happily as just the two of us. That happiness wasn't solely in having children. Or maybe it was my serious illness 3 years ago, the surgery and the long, painful recovery. That changed things. Vernon had grown distant then, cold, as if I had become a burden, or he was simply tired of me, our monotonous life, this old house, an aging face. I closed my eyes, attempting to banish these heavy, pressing thoughts. Tomorrow would bring a new day. Perhaps I only felt this way because of exhaustion and loneliness. Winter blues, that was all. I needed to pull myself together and do something worthwhile. When Vernon returned in a week, I would prepare something special, something delicious. We would sit down and talk, really talk, heart to heart. It had been so long since we had done that. Sleep came fitfully, restless and uneasy. I would drift off, only to be jolted awake by fierce gusts of wind or the creaking window frames. I dreamed of that old woman from the store, her all-seeing, piercing eyes, her dry, gripping fingers clutching my sleeve. "Don't touch the snow," she repeated over and over in the dream, like a haunting incantation. Early in the morning, still fully dark, I awoke. Squinting, I glanced at the clock, just after 6. Outside, a faint light was beginning to creep in. The blizzard had finally ceased. The silence was heavy, dense, almost ringing in its stillness. I rose, draped a warm knitted robe over my shoulders, and went down to the kitchen. Mechanically, I set the kettle on the stove and lit the burner. When I turned to the window, I froze, unable to believe what I saw. The yard lay untouched under a smooth, flawless layer of snow-pristine white. Yet leading from the gate to the house and up to the first-floor windows were deep, clear footprints. They were large, heavy boot prints, definitely not Vernon's. I knew his shoes well, his size, his gait. These tracks were unfamiliar. Someone had come to our house during the night, walked around the yard, approached the windows, while I had been completely alone. Clutching the windowsill with pale fingers, my heart pounded wildly, as if it might burst free from my chest. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the tracks, trying desperately to grasp what was unfolding. The deep boot prints led straight from the gate to the house, methodically circling 2 sides. They stopped at every ground-floor window, as if whoever made them was carefully inspecting the house. Someone had walked around my home in the dead of night while I slept, utterly defenseless. My hands trembled slightly, and I stepped back from the window, pressing my palm against my mouth to stifle a frightened sob struggling to escape. Breathing felt suddenly difficult. I had to calm myself, collect my thoughts, think rationally. Maybe it was the neighbors. No, that couldn't be. The elderly Petersons on the left were both over 70, such heavy. Deep prints didn't match theirs. The lot to the right had stood empty for a year. Its owners had long since moved to the city. The house was shuttered up, and across the street lived only Mrs. Higgins. But why would an elderly woman wander a stranger's yard on a blizzardy night? Forcing myself forward, I peered more closely at the prints. They weren't random or messy, but purposeful and deliberate. From the gate, they led straight to the living room windows, then neatly along the wall to the kitchen windows, then to the back of the house, where the pantry and basement entrance were. It was as if someone was methodically stalking the house's perimeter, carefully peering into every window, watching, studying, inspecting. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. Goosebumps prickled my skin. Were these burglars casing the place? Yet they hadn't taken anything, hadn't even tried to break in. The gate was latched securely. The lock was untouched. The tracks led only from the gate into the yard and back. This meant the person had somehow opened the gate, walked calmly inside, circled the house, then just as calmly closed the gate and left in no hurry. The kettle on the stove shrilled sharply, and I shuddered violently at the sudden piercing noise. My hand shook as I shut off the gas, yet the thought of brewing tea didn't cross my mind. Immediate action was necessary. I had to decide quickly. Should I contact the police? But what exactly could I report? That some stranger had been wandering around the yard all night without stealing, breaking, or damaging anything. My mind went to our community officer, Gareth Purnell. I had known him for years, ever since he joined this precinct as a young recruit. Now in his 50s, he remained a dedicated and reliable presence. Known for being conscientious and approachable, he was definitely someone I could reach out to. Hastily, I climbed to the bedroom and threw on whatever clothes I could find, warm sweatpants, a thick wool sweater, swapping slippers for sturdy winter boots. I grabbed my phone and found his number in my old contacts. My fingers trembled violently as I dialed. Officer Purnell, this is Alara Vance from Chestnut Street, House 17. I'm sorry for the early call, but something odd happened here. Good morning, Mrs. Vance, his familiar calm, slightly rough voice responded. What's going on? Last night, someone was at my house. They wandered through the yard and left footprints in the snow. I was alone. My husband left for a long trip, and I got really scared. I see. Did they take anything? Break in? No. Nothing's missing, nothing's damaged, but the tracks lead right up to the windows on all sides, like they were intentionally peering inside or searching for something. A moment of silence as he considered this. All right, I'll be over as soon as I can. 20 or 30 minutes at most. Stay inside, don't disturb the footprints, and check every window and door thoroughly. Make sure everything's securely locked. Thank you so much, I breathed out, relief washing over me. I'll wait. The phone went down on the table, and I immediately started inspecting the house with fresh caution. The familiar home suddenly felt strange, hostile, and unsafe. Every creak of the floorboards and every rustle outside the window made me flinch, eyes darting nervously. I systematically moved through the rooms on the ground floor, checking the windows all firmly latched, with no signs of forced entry. The front door was locked with 2 turns of the key and the chain, just as I had left it before bed. Everything appeared as it should, yet this offered no comfort. If anything, my unease deepened. Drawn inexplicably back to the kitchen window, I studied the footprints again. Morning light made them even clearer and more unnerving. They were large and deep, spaced widely apart. Definitely a man. Tall, heavy-set. He walked with calm assurance, fully aware of his purpose. The next 20 minutes crawled by, agonizingly slow. I sat clutching a cup of cold tea, my hands trembling, eyes glued to the window, unable to tear away. What if this stranger returned now? What if he was watching nearby, waiting for me to step outside or lose focus? Suddenly, bright headlights flooded the window. I leapt up and looked out to see the familiar police cruiser. Gareth Purnell stepped out, a tall, heavy-set African-American man in his 50s, wearing a uniform jacket and warm hat. I practically ran to the door, opening it before he could ring the bell. Officer Purnell, thank you so much for coming so fast. Don't mention it, Mrs. Vance. It's my duty. He brushed snow off his boots and followed me into the kitchen, his sharp eyes immediately catching sight of the yard through the window. Show me where the footprints are. Together, we stepped out onto the cold porch. The biting air stung my flushed face and lungs as he carefully descended the creaky wooden steps, scrutinizing the snowy yard. Squatting down, he examined each print thoughtfully. Boots, size 12, maybe 13, he murmured, estimating. Deep tread solework boots or combat boots, coming from the gate. His gaze followed the trail from the gate to the living room windows, then along the house's back wall, back again to the gate. Strange behavior. Who could it be? I hugged myself tightly, shivering not just from the cold. That's a very important question, he said, standing and brushing snow from his knees. Mrs. Vance, do you have any serious conflicts with neighbors? Anyone holding a grudge? No, not at all. We get along normally with everyone. Quiet, peaceful lives. No quarrels or troubles. And your husband, when exactly did he leave? Yesterday evening around 7. He's gone for a long haul, at least a week, maybe longer. He nodded slowly, jotting notes in a worn notebook. So whoever this was knew you were alone. That's interesting and worrying. They entered calmly, opened the gate with care, walked through and back, then left without rushing. Confident behavior. Officer, what do you think was their purpose? Why come at night and just wander? That's what we need to figure out, he said gravely. Several possibilities. Maybe they were scouting for valuables before a burglary. Or checking if the house was occupied or empty. Or perhaps something far worse than theft, preparing for an attack, violence. He glanced around at the neighboring homes. Do any neighbors have security cameras? I thought hard. Mrs. Higgins across the street has a system. She put it up last year after the Petersons had their garage broken into. Excellent. That could be very helpful. Let's go see if she'll let us check the footage. We stepped out and crossed the snowy street to Mrs. Higgins' house, a neat, well-kept place painted a soft blue, with charming wooden shutters. I rang the gate bell. After a minute and a half, the door opened to reveal Mrs. Higgins herself, a plump, kindly woman in her 70s, wearing a bright floral housecoat, her gray hair pulled into a tidy bun. Alara, dear, what's wrong? Is everything all right? She asked anxiously, eyeing the officer nearby. Mrs. Higgins, hello. Someone strange was in my yard last night. They left clear footprints in the snow. Officer Purnell is here to investigate. Could we possibly see the footage from your camera? Maybe it caught something important. Oh dear, someone roaming around at night. And you were alone. Vernon's away on a long haul. How frightening. Please come in. We'll look at the video. Inside, the cozy home led us to a small but tidy living room, filled with sturdy, dark wooden furniture. A modern flat-screen TV hung on the wall above a black video recorder box, blinking red and green lights. Mrs. Higgins fussed nervously, struggling with multiple remotes. Here, it should work now, she said uncertainly. Officer Purnell, you handle this. My grandson set it up, and I don't really understand it. He nodded and took the remote, quickly rewinding the tape. I stood frozen, eyes fixed on the grainy black and white images showing the street outside Mrs. Higgins' house, my house across the way, the gate, part of the yard. You said your husband left around 7 in the evening, Gareth asked, without looking away from the screen. Yes, around 7, maybe a bit later. He rewound to 8 o'clock, setting the playback to normal speed. The image was far from clear, grainy, black and white, obscured in parts by the swirling snow. But overall, the events could still be made out. The street lay utterly vacant, deserted, blanketed by a dense snowfall that severely limited visibility. Time on the footage crept forward slowly. 9 p.m., then 10, then 11. Look right here, Purnell said, jabbing a thick finger at the screen with focus. It was 1:45. Suddenly, a dark, ordinary sedan appeared on the empty street, moving at a leisurely pace before coming to a neat stop directly across from my house. A tall figure, clad in a bulky dark jacket and a knit cap pulled low over his forehead, exited the vehicle with calm deliberation. His face was impossible to discern from the grainy recording. He scanned the surroundings cautiously, as if ensuring no one was watching, then confidently opened my gate and slipped beyond it, vanishing into the shadows. "Lord have mercy," I whispered, my insides turning icy, legs weakening. 10 minutes or so later, maybe 12, the man re-emerged in the frame. He walked back out of my yard just as calmly, methodically latched the gate behind him, climbed into his car, and drove off slowly, disappearing around the corner. "Pause," Officer Purnell ordered sharply, pressing a button. He rewound the footage slightly, freezing the frame when the car was most visible. "Here's the license plate. It's tough to make out because of the snow and darkness, but I think we can pick out a few digits. And on the side door, there's a logo, some writing." I squinted, staring hard at the blurred image. Indeed, something light-colored was painted on the car's side, a large emblem or lettering. "Looks like a company vehicle," the officer mused. "Not a private car. Some organization, a serious firm, maybe real estate appraisers." Suddenly, Mrs. Higgins, who had been standing nearby watching intently with her hands pressed to her chest, spoke up. "But from a realtor agency." I turned sharply toward her, confused. "Why appraisers, Maria? What for?" She hesitated. "I don't know for sure. Maybe someone's planning to sell the house and had it appraised." Her voice faltered when she caught sight of my pale, frozen expression. "Oh, Elara, forgive me. I must sound foolish," she added quickly. Officer Purnell, alert as a seasoned tracker, cut in. "Mrs. Higgins, why did a real estate agency come to mind immediately?" "Just an association," the neighbor mumbled, embarrassed. "Last month, when I was buying my daughter's apartment in the city, an appraiser from an agency came to me. Late in the evening, just like this. Driving the same kind of company car, with a bright logo on the door. It looked very similar. The officer zoomed in on the car as much as the footage allowed. The lettering on the door was blurred, dark, and distant, but the first word could still be made out. Hearth. Something. He jotted it down in his notebook. "We must urgently check all the real estate agencies in this city and county. Find out who owns vehicles with this kind of marking." I fell silent, speechless. A single dreadful thought churned in my mind, making me feel sick. A real estate appraiser had come to inspect my house in the dead of night. But who could have called them? The property was exclusively under my name. I'd never authorized anyone, never granted power of attorney. I wasn't selling, this was my home. Gareth Purnell gently, but firmly rested a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Vance, have you given anyone notarized power of attorney for the house, anything to allow a sale or sign documents?" "No, absolutely not." I shook my head firmly. "I never even considered selling. This is my home. I've lived here all my life. And your husband, Vernon, could he have done it?" The ground seemed to vanish beneath me. I froze. "Vernon? No, he couldn't act without my consent or knowledge. The house was titled solely to me. Theoretically, he had no authority." "In theory, yes," the officer agreed cautiously. "But in practice, fraud and forgery do happen. We'll check all real estate agencies in every district. If it was really an appraiser from one of them, we'll find out exactly who ordered this nighttime inspection." By midday, we were sitting in the city center office of Hearthstone Realty. Gareth Purnell had identified 3 agencies with similar logos through the vehicle database and called them. On the third call, they confirmed an appraiser had indeed visited 17 Chestnut Street the previous evening. The agency director, Isaac Graves, a man in his 40s dressed in an expensive suit, greeted us with polite but strained formality. "Please take a seat." He motioned toward leather chairs across from his desk. "How can I assist?" "Your employee went to 17 Chestnut Street yesterday evening," Purnell said, flashing his badge. "Conducted an appraisal. We want details. Graves frowned and opened a folder. Yes, that's correct. An order for a private house appraisal, including the lot. What's the issue? I leaned forward, trying to keep my voice steady despite trembling hands. That house is mine, and I never requested any appraisal. The director raised his eyebrows. How so? The order's in the owner's name. He turned the folder to show a document. Client Vance Vernon Michael. Owner Vance Alara. And here's a power of attorney from the owner. Power of attorney, my voice cracked. I gave none. Graves blinked, confused, rifled through papers again, and pulled out another sheet. Here. Power of attorney from Vance E., authorizing her spouse to handle real estate transactions. Notarized, he handed me the paper. I stared, eyes locked on it. My name, passport number, address all were accurate. At the bottom, a signature. Mine. But I had never signed it. It's a forgery, I whispered, dizziness washing over me. I didn't sign this. Officer Purnell took the document, examining it closely. Mr. Graves, when was this power of attorney submitted? About a week ago, Graves replied. Vernon Vance came in person, said he wished to sell the house, requested an appraisal. We processed it and scheduled a site visit. He claimed his wife knew, but she was too busy to manage it herself and trusted him. Did you verify the power of attorney's authenticity? The officer asked, looking the director squarely in the eye. It has a notary seal. Everything seemed in order. Graves shifted uncomfortably. We aren't obligated to verify every power of attorney through the notary board. That's not our responsibility. Show me all communication with this client, Purnell interrupted. Documents, contracts, emails. Graves nodded and accessed his computer. I stared blankly, my head buzzing. Vernon, my husband, had forged my signature to sell our house without telling me. Here, Graves said, turning the monitor toward us. First contact was 2 weeks ago. He emailed asking about appraisal and sale. We arranged a meeting. He came with documents. We drew up the appraisal contract. The appraiser inspected the house. At night, I added dully. At 11 p.m., while I was asleep, he roamed the property, peered into windows. The client specifically requested evening hours, Graves explained. He said someone was there during the day and that the appraisal had to go unnoticed. He spread his hands. We can't refuse clients if their requests don't violate the law. And working with forged documents, that isn't illegal. Purnell slammed his palm on the table in frustration. I wasn't aware the documents were forged, Graves said, pale. Everything looked legitimate. What happened next? The officer gestured toward the screen. After the appraisal, we compiled a report valuing the house at $420,000. Vance accepted the amount and asked us to find a buyer. We listed the property. When, I interrupted. This morning, and already a buyer responded, serious, ready to pay cash. Yes. A meeting is scheduled for the day after tomorrow to sign a preliminary contract. I buried my face in my hands. The day after tomorrow, 2 days away, and my home, where I had lived for over 30 years, would be sold without my consent. Where is this buyer now? Purnell asked. I don't know. He called and left a number. Said the money is ready and he wants a quick deal. The officer wrote down the number. Mr. Graves, this deal must be canceled. A criminal investigation will be launched for fraud and forgery. But we have nothing to do with that. Graves sprang up, alarmed. We acted with trust and honesty. Instead, we were tricked. This situation will be resolved. For now, hand over every document, all correspondence copies, and the contact details of your appraisers. 30 minutes later, we left the agency. My steps felt unreal, as if I were dreaming, my feet numb. Gareth steadied me by the elbow. Mrs. Vance, you need to sit down. See that diner over there? Let's go inside. We chose a table beside the window. The officer ordered tea with sugar for me, coffee for himself. I clasped the warm cup, but warmth eluded me. The chill was internal, sharp and biting. "Why?" I murmured. "Why would he do such a thing?" Purnell exhaled, took a sip of coffee. "Money, Mrs. Vance. 400,000 isn't a small amount. He must have needed it desperately, or maybe he planned to start over. It happens. But this is betrayal. You've been married so many years, 32 years. I've seen all sorts during that time." The officer shook his head slowly. "People change, or they just reveal who they really are." I took a small sip of tea. The hot sweetness revived me somewhat, clearing my mind. "What do I do now?" "First, we'll head to the station. You'll give a statement." "I've already called ahead. They'll open a file. Your husband will be summoned for questioning. We'll order handwriting analysis to verify the signature and investigate the notary. If we can prove forgery, and he faces prison time for large-scale fraud." "Prison," I repeated, the word feeling odd on my tongue. My husband, the man I'd shared half my life with, could be sent away. "And the house, will it remain mine?" "Absolutely. The transaction is void. The papers are forged. The house belongs to you, and no one can take it away." I nodded silently. Hours passed at the police station. I wrote a detailed statement, answered numerous questions. Officer Purnell described the footprints, the security camera footage, and the agency's involvement. A young detective with a weary expression took careful notes and nodded. "We'll serve your husband a subpoena," she said at last. "When does he return from his trip?" "He should be back in a week, but I can call him." "Tell him to come sooner." She shook her head firmly. "No. Don't warn him. Let him believe the process is proceeding normally. It'll be easier to detain him that way." I agreed and stepped back out into the street. Darkness was settling in early December's short winter days. Gareth accompanied me to the bus stop. "Stay strong," he said as we parted. "I know this is tough, but you did the right thing. You can't let something like this slide." "Thank you," I replied, shaking his hand. "If not for you, it's my job," he interrupted with a wave. "You should really thank that old lady who warned you about the snow." Miracles, honestly. On the bus, I rested my forehead against the cold window. The old lady, how had she known? I recalled her piercing eyes, those dry fingers brushing my sleeve, her warning. "When your husband leaves, don't touch the snow." If I had shoveled the snow the night before as Vernon ordered, the footprints wouldn't have been visible. I would never have noticed someone had been there, and overnight new snow would have covered everything. I would have lived on, unaware the house was being sold behind my back. In just 2 days, Vernon would have either come or called to say the house was sold, or perhaps he would have said nothing at all and disappeared with the money. What could I have done then? Proving anything would have been nearly impossible if the deal had closed. Back home, I removed my coat and sat by the kitchen window, staring out at the yard where the tracks were now faintly dusted with fresh snow. I should have eaten, but the nausea from the betrayal and thoughts overwhelmed me. 32 years. I decooked for him, cleaned, waited for his returns from trips. When he was ill, I was there, though distant, cold. At the time, I thought it was just his nature, the toll of work wearing him down. But he was merely biding his time to cast me aside, sell the house, take the money, and start anew. Maybe he'd had someone else for a long time, a younger, beautiful woman, and dreamed of running away to her, with me standing in the way. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I let them fall freely, sitting there crying, staring into the darkness beyond the window, not for my husband, but for myself, for the years lost to a man who had ultimately been a stranger, and for being left alone at 58 with a shattered heart and memories of betrayal. The phone rang. Vernon's name lit up on the screen. I stared at the call for a long moment before declining it. A minute later, a text arrived. How are things? Got here fine. Talk tomorrow. Brief and dry as always. I did not reply. The night passed without rest. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, sifting through all that had been between us, searching for the moment everything shattered. Or had it been broken from the very start? Perhaps he never loved me. Maybe our marriage was one of convenience. He needed a house, a wife to manage it. Now he'd decided it was enough, time to take what he could and leave. Morning found me shattered, eyes swollen, face unfamiliar in the mirror. Gray strands tangled with wrinkles and fatigue, old and unattractive. Was that why he chose to discard me? No. Enough. I straightened, confronting my reflection. No more pitying myself or excusing him. He is a criminal. He tried to steal from me, leave me homeless, and I would not allow it. I dressed, went downstairs, made breakfast, forced myself to eat. Then I called the lawyer Vernon had once used for paperwork, explained the situation, and asked for help with a divorce. Come by tomorrow, the lawyer advised. We'll get everything drawn up. You're doing the right thing by acting quickly. This kind of thing can't be forgiven. Hanging up, the word divorce felt strange on my lips. I never imagined I would say it. I thought Vernon and I would stay together until the end, like our parents had, lifelong companions. Instead, it ended the moment he grew bored. 2 days later, Gareth Purnell called. Mrs. Vance, your husband has returned. We detained him this morning at the depot. The interrogation is underway. Would you like to be present? No, I answered firmly. I don't want to see him. Understood. I'll keep you informed. He confessed to everything. Says he got into debt from slot machines, lost a large sum, and creditors were threatening him. He decided to sell the house, thinking you wouldn't discover it until it was too late. And now, the case will go to court. Given his confession and the failed sale, he'll probably get probation or a short prison sentence, plus compensation to you for moral damages. Okay, thank you, I said, ending the call. Slot machines, debts. So it wasn't about another woman, or me growing old and unattractive, just money, gambling, and foolishness. Somehow that didn't ease the pain. Maybe a mistress would have made more sense, at least a human explanation. But this way, he'd sold our life to cover debts. Spring arrived early, unexpectedly. By late March, the snow melted within days, revealing dark earth and the first green sprouts of grass. I stood by the kitchen window with a coffee cup, gazing at the yard where, on a cold December night, a stranger's footprints had been pressed, footprints that changed my life forever. The trial was swift. Vernon was sentenced to 2 years, probation, and required to pay $5,000 in compensation. The lawyer explained this was the maximum achievable since no real damages occurred and the sale had not completed. The house remained mine. Vernon paid immediately. In court, he kept his eyes on the floor, offering no apology. The divorce was finalized a month later. Vernon moved in with his brother, took his belongings. While he was away, I stayed with a friend to avoid facing him. Returning home, I found the house empty. Half the closet shelves gaped vacant. On the wall, a pale spot marked where his photograph had hung. I took down the remaining photos, boxed them, and stored them in the attic. I didn't discard them. After all, it was a third of my life, but I no longer wanted to see them. The first weeks post-divorce felt strange. The silence in the house was deafening. No doors slammed, no dinner requests, no grumbling. I wandered the rooms, uncertain whether to feel relief or sorrow. Neighbors were kind. Mrs. Higgins visited daily with pies and updates. The Petersons invited me for tea. Officer Purnell stopped by a couple of times, checking on me. You're strong, Mrs. Vance, he said once over tea. Not every woman at your age would start over, but you're managing. What choice do I have? I laughed. Sit and pity myself. Many do, but you keep going. That means a lot. I began thinking about work. Retirement was still some years away. What would I live on? My savings and compensation wouldn't last forever. I refused to sell the house. It was all I had left. I skimmed job ads. At my age, options were scarce. Sales clerk, cleaner, night watchman. The requirements were intimidating under 45. Experience, computer skills. Where could a housewife with 3 decades of domestic life fit in? At the beginning of April, I got lucky. The local library was seeking a part-time assistant librarian, small salary, but close to home. I went for an interview with Nina, the director, a pleasant woman around 60. Did I have experience with books? No, but I read a lot. All my life, I loved books. I spoke sincerely. Reading had been my escape all those years. That was enough, Nina smiled. I need someone who loves books, not just punches the clock. Come Monday. The library was a quiet, cozy place, an old building with high ceilings, creaky parquet floors, rows of shelves, smelling of paper and comfort. I quickly got the hang of it, helping readers, shelving books, taping up covers. The work wasn't hard, but it was pleasant. Gradually, I met the regulars. Grandmothers searching for romance novels, school kids with classics, young moms with fairy tales, and an elderly retired military man with history books. One day, Vivian, about 70, lingered at the counter. "Alara, honey, aren't you the one Maria Higgins was telling about?" "Mrs. Higgins?" I asked. "Yes, she's our neighbor. She told me your story about the husband who wanted to sell the house." "How awful." I pursed my lips. Gossip had spread through the neighborhood that winter. It was over now. "But good for you for not putting up with it," Vivian said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I put up with mine for 30 years. Drank, ran around, raised a hand to me. I stayed silent, raised the kids. He died of cirrhosis 10 years ago. Only after his death did I understand how one can live freely, without fear. You still have plenty of life left. 58 is young, she continued. My friend got married at 62, happy as a schoolgirl. Don't give up. Vivian started coming by more often, introducing me to other ladies, Lucille, Tammy, Zora, all about the same age, widows or divorced. They gathered, went to the theater, to exhibitions. "Join us," Lucille offered. "On Saturday, there's a retro music concert at the community center. Relive our youth." I agreed. I hadn't been anywhere in a long time. With Vernon, cultural life ended 10 years ago. He considered it a waste of time. The concert was pleasant. Songs from my youth, the 70s, 80s. I listened to familiar melodies and felt something thawing inside. Nearby, my friends sang along, laughed, shared memories. Afterward, we went to a cafe and talked heart to heart. Everyone had their own difficult story. Lucille's husband left for a younger woman. Tammy's husband died at 45. Zora never married, dedicating her life to work. "You know what I realized," Tammy said. "Happiness isn't in men, it's in us. If you have a hobby, friends, a goal, you're happy. And if all happiness is in a husband, he leaves, and that's it, life is over." "Right," Zora nodded. "I've been alone all my life. I live, work, go to theaters, a full life." I listened and thought they were right. All my life, I built everything around Vernon, his schedule, desires, moods, forgetting about myself. Now I needed to remember who I was, what I loved, what I wanted. At home, I took out an old album. There I was at 20, a student at teacher's college, dreaming of becoming a teacher. I got married, children didn't happen, I didn't work, sat at home for 30 years. But there were dreams. I wanted to draw, travel, learn French. I put it all off for later. But now, nothing was stopping me. I took a notebook and wrote, "What do I want? 1. Learn to draw. 2. Go to the city museum. 3. Learn French. 4. Fix up the garden. 5. Find a hobby. The list was short, but it was a start. I smiled for the first time in months, sincerely. The next day, I signed up for drawing classes at the community center. Classes were on Tuesdays and Thursdays, just on my days off. The instructor, Alice, greeted me warmly. "Never too late to start," she said. "The main thing is desire." The first lessons were hard. My hand wouldn't obey. Lines were crooked. But I didn't give up. I came home and practiced. By the end of April, I drew my first still life, apples in a vase, hung it in the kitchen, and felt pride every time. In May, I decided on a trip. Took the weekend, bought a bus ticket to the state capitol, walked through museums, took photos, felt free and happy. Returning, I felt a surge of strength. Life goes on. It started anew, without deception, without coldness. One evening in early June, I was sitting on the porch with tea. It smelled of blooming lilacs. I had planted 3 bushes in the spring. "Mrs. Higgins walked up to the gate. "Alara, can I come in?" "Of course, come in." The neighbor sat nearby. "Wanted to ask, remember that old lady who spoke about the snow?" I shuddered. How could I forget? I remember why. I tried to find her. "Did she help you?" I asked at the store. "Nobody knows her. Candace says she was there one time, never saw her again." Strange, I thought. I thought about her too. Maybe she was a guardian angel. "Mrs. Higgins lowered her voice. "How did she know about the snow?" I chuckled. "I don't know. Maybe intuition or life experience, or maybe fate." The neighbor sighed. "You paid for her groceries, did a good deed, so she paid you back." "Fair." I was silent, looking at the sunset. "Maybe so. Good begets good." I helped the old woman. She helped me. "You know, Maria," I said quietly, "I am grateful to her. If not for her, I would have lived on not knowing the truth." It hurt. It was insulting. But I broke free from the lies, from the cold, and now I live for real. The first time in many years. "Mrs. Higgins hugged me. "You did good, Alara. You didn't break. Many would have gone into depression, but you got up and kept going. Proud of you." We sat until it got dark. Then the neighbor left, and I remained. Looked at the stars, listened to the silence, thought about how life is unpredictable. You never know what tomorrow will bring, but that is not scary. I remembered the old woman's words, "Do not touch the snow." Such a simple phrase, and how it changed everything. I mentally thanked that unknown woman. Thank you for the truth. Thank you for the salvation. Thank you for the chance to start over. And in the morning, I woke up with new plans. Sign up for French, plant a flower bed, live on. Life continued. New, my own. And I was ready for it. If you liked my story and want to hear more, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you'd like to support me, you can do it through Super Thanks. It would mean a lot. In the comments, tell me which city you're watching from and what time it is so I can see how far my story reaches. I've added 2 more life stories on the screen just for you. Click one now, and let's keep spending time together. Much love, see you soon.